to Fredrik Bengtsson, who will talk about burnout as a possibility of growth.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. And first I wanted to say something to Alfred, actually, who invited me to come here. And when he did, I remember I told him that I think it's a very good idea to make this kind of conference here in Sweden. I don't know if all of you, or at least some of you, are probably aware that Sweden is considered to be a very extremist country when it comes to values, meaning that we are very forward-thinking when it comes to everything that has to do with self-development, self-actualization. Also, I think that we are taking a lead in the eco-society that we have also been talking about today. So, knowing all of that of Sweden, I think it's interesting to explore the paradox that at the same time we are also facing all-time high level of sick leave due to burnout and psychological illness. So it's an interesting and intricate question to reflect on how come the people who have every possibility to shape their lives still suffer and have a lack of life quality. So basically that is the core of my little speech, and I will try to tell you some things about how I have come to the conclusion that we are actually looking, as I see it, on burnout and psychological illness in a wrong way. And the reason I think that is that for 15 years now we have actually had the same debate. I remember like 15 years ago when burnout suddenly came to Sweden and the Western world. Suddenly from nowhere we were having lots of people who turned ill. And at that time, I was a psychologist. I was quite fresh, and I had had a personal experience a few years earlier. So I got interested in a very special niche. I got interested in knowing more about how come people who were quite young, like late 20s or around 30, good career paths, happy lives, everything that we normally are searching for in our life satisfaction. How come these kind of people felt stuck, and how come they suffer from depression and burnout at a time in life when life is supposed to have no worries? So at that time there was really no answer for that. So what I did was that I started interviewing people all over the country, and I was interested to knowing what were their values all about, and what did they experience in the work environment, and how did they feel about the norms of society. And that work came to me as an insight one day when I stumbled upon something that was given to humanity from Buddha that we have heard also a lot about today. Suddenly one day when I was putting all of this work together to write my first book, I read a quote from Buddha that said, "In the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of the things not meant for you." And I still remember how powerful these words were for me, because I realized that with those words it summarized the core, as I see it, of the problem we have not only in Sweden but connected to the development in the Western world. Because if you have your own experience, or if you have met people who have suffered from these issues, you know that you do not become burnt out from one day to another. It means that you have probably not taken care of yourself as you should. You could say that you have not loved yourself to start with, because you're not treating yourself with love. Probably you have also neglected the people around you, your close ones. You have not had sufficient time to be with them. And you have probably not taken care of either your physical self, your mental self, or your spiritual self. And I also thought that it's interesting to see that many of these people that I focused on, who had all the possibilities in one way to kind of choose their lives, you could say that they were free to quit, for example, their employer, to start working somewhere else, or to move to another country, or to choose another path in life. That's the situation we have in this part of the world, that we have actually freed ourselves to be able to make conscious choices. And still, many of these people were stuck, relating again to what Buddha said, holding on to things instead of letting go of things that were negative. So I realized that actually the core of our problem with these health issues are not an illness, it's actually maybe a healthy reaction to something that needs to be looked on at the more society level, a more cultural level. And for the past 15 years, that has been kind of my struggle, that I have developed different programs based on more existential psychology, meaning that I have tried to have people who suffer from those kind of problems to feel empowered, to understand that maybe their reaction is something that comes to them because if you continue living in the same way, at one point in life you will feel that you have missed out on actually what matters to you the most. So many people that I have met throughout the years have found other paths or other ways of looking on life or having other paths to follow. And some people have also had positions in their societies and organizations where they work, where they have also been able to use some of their knowledge to change structures for others. And I think it's important to remember that structures from working life or norms in the society are not set. They are actually something that we who live in this time shape together. So I think that one of the major issues that we are facing is that many people who hit the wall, as we say when people get burned out, they don't understand that it's actually something that is signaling something to them that is more a symptom of something that is not healthy. Instead, they get the perspective that they suffer from an illness and that they should adapt to the structures in which they live. So we have a lot of different perspectives on stress management, how to be able to cope, how to tolerate more stress, when in fact maybe it's the other way around. And I think that we have been discussing this today from different angles, and we have seen also the different problems with the structures around us. So I am not of the opinion that everything has to do with the individual and the individual's adaptation, but I don't believe either that we can sit and wait until the politicians or the corporations, the workplaces change. Somehow we have to find a way to do things together. That is why I believe that this kind of conferences, for example, is very important. And again, referring to Sweden as a culture, I think that for the past maybe 3-4 years, I can see that there is a movement of people becoming more and more aware. So I think that the level of awareness is increasing, but with that level of awareness, there also comes attention. And I think where we are at right now, I feel that many people are experiencing a situation when they want to move forward, but something is holding back. And as we heard from Otto when he was talking about fear, I think that that is maybe the fear and lack of courage to change are maybe the focus that we need to have in terms of both our own journey, but also in terms of the structures that are surrounding us. And one way of facing fear is, of course, to bring them out of the closet and to take a close look. What is this really about? And if you tell a person to change and you don't know what's the option, then it's also a human reaction to hold on to something because it's the only thing you know. So that's why I think it's really important that we take some time and that we also try to find a way of tapping into this more global movement that has to do with insight, awareness, and trying to show a new path, a new way of making a society grow, a new way of living, a new way of relating to life. And actually history shows that every 400 years or so, there is a major change that has occurred in the Western history. So there is a lot of research telling us that right now we are actually in the midst of such a tremendous change. Some people, of course, are more aware of that and are what we could call the leaders of that change. Some people are far behind and the big mass of people are maybe one step forward and one step in the things that belong to the old structure. And sudden change doesn't happen when it comes to this kind of major shift in the society. It's something that happens gradually. So that's also where patience comes in. That's also where I believe meditation, mindfulness, stopping ourselves to become still and to understand what we are experiencing, talking to other people. This is a time of togetherness. As we have also said and discussed today, it's not one structure or one factor that can change. What we all need to change is something that we can only do together. And I think it's important to start with ourselves, to think about what can I do, what kind of context am I in, and how can I use the knowledge that I gain to inspire, to help to share knowledge, to show courage, different things that we can do to help shaping the new time. Because the new time, I believe, is not coming from the structures, it's coming from the people. That doesn't mean, as I said previously, that corporations, working life, politicians do not have a responsibility, but I believe that they get inspired by this movement instead of us waiting for them to tell us what is the answer. Because it's something new that is supposed to be shaped. And I think that we are all participants in that, and we all have to assume that responsibility to move forward. This morning, when we were listening to Julia's speech, I found it interesting to reflect on how she also related to different cultures, and I think that is something that is very useful for us in this part of the world. I myself, through my work, have had a lot of useful knowledge and insight working in African countries, West Africa the most. And in the sustainability projects that I'm working with there, I think it's interesting how the situation and the culture in that part of the world is also mirroring what we have here, and the other way around, of course. So I believe that we also need to open up to see what can we learn from outside, not only looking in our own society. For example, if we meet people, I'm almost sure that all of you have had that experience when you travel to different countries, different parts of the world, where people are less fortunate. They have less worries, they look happy, they are more present, and they are more attuned to their instinct. And it's important to know that that is something that we all have. It's not something we learn. It's actually a human condition to be attached to ourselves. But the problem is that, it has actually had its purpose in the materialistic society in which we have lived for the 100 years that we have behind us. Leaving what we felt and what we needed was actually something that filled a purpose. That's how we actually built the welfare state that we have today. Not thinking too much about how we felt, not thinking too much about our self-development. It was duty above all to try to build the country. But there comes a point when you have to realize that journey cannot continue along the same path. Now we have all of that. So now we have to expand ourselves to build further. And building further is not necessarily something that has to do with more and more. It's maybe something that has to do with developing different dimensions of ourselves. So I think the path forward, as I see it at a more individual level that we all have to be aware of today, is what do I know about myself? And when I know about who I am and what I need, then I also need to explore how do I follow that? How do I actually take the opportunity that we have in this lifetime, in this society, to actually live my purpose? Do I know what is my purpose, or do I know what is meaningful for me? These are the kind of questions that people who are suffering from burnout are always coming to me to explore. Very common around 35 to 45, having everything and still not feeling happy. that is the situation that we need to change, since we also have a fortunate situation in the country to be a leader, to take the lead, to show other parts of the world how we can actually move into a new time. That's about what I think I could manage with the time slot I got today. So I think I can leave maybe a few room for a few questions if there is anybody. Or maybe you, Sabine, you have a question maybe for me?
I have so many questions. But how do you find that the transition from the sort of ultra-connected, materialistic world into the spiritual wisdom world, out of your perspective? How is that transition going with the patients that you meet?
Well, I actually see that that is something that has grown tremendously throughout the 10 past years. That's why I'm talking about the movement, because as we said also before, no matter if you go to Paris or Stockholm or New York or wherever in the Western world, we are all talking about the same thing. Relationships, well-being, what is the purpose, what is meaningful. So I think it's happening between people.
Because sometimes it's as if we all know the words, we all know the quotes, and the intention is there, but sometimes it's more of really the capacity of walking one's own talk.
Yes, and that is about courage, of course, because it's always easier to stick with what we know instead of opening up for something that we don't know. And having lived in this more materialistic society, we are also very afraid of more existential spiritual questions.
Especially in Sweden.
Especially in Sweden, which is one of the most non-religious countries in the world. So that is a big journey.
I heard a quote that the road to happiness is a sense of gratitude and also giving. So maybe that's sort of cultivating that.
Yes.
We would love to hear more of you, and thank you so much for your time and also for giving your insights. A warm applause.
Thank you.